the ending of Wings Week. Welcome on in, whether this is your first time here, you are joining us. Thank you for being here with us today. You are loved, appreciated, welcome here, and you are enough. Guys, today is going to be a long one. We're going to be doing short film 6, Mama, 7, Awake, and I'm going to be summarizing everything at the end. I am very, very sad to be coming to the end of these, but at the same point in time, there's still so much more to go. So that's exciting to me. But let's do it. Without further ado, let's get into these short films now. Oh, I have chills. I have chills right now, guys. I have chills.
With a face that resembled her son's, timeless, ageless, and full of inner strength. The beautiful woman smiled with dignity. Her gaze was fulfillment, her greeting a homecoming. Silently, I stretched my hands out to her.
Yeah, we mentioned Eva earlier. There's definitely a play here because that's from her chapter, I believe. Hold on, I want to go back really quick because that was really, really quick. Hold on. Okay, physical examination moods, anxious and something, irritable, illogical and retarded thought process, not retarded in the way we think, behind from the clinical sense. An assessment is Munchausen syndrome. Interesting. Okay. Huh. Same pills we saw in Jimin's video. That looked like V. Wow. Okay. Oh, that's the painting from Jimin's. Because the sky is blue, because the sun is shining. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. So it's the mother thing. Okay, so his adds up with V then. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, there's so much there. All right. Be back. Okay, so here is the quote from the beginning, which is really, really interesting. I've reread almost this entire chapter because there's a lot of really, really impactful stuff here. So, I cannot utter a word. The beautiful woman smiled at me in a friendly way beneath features like her son's, timeless and without age, full of an animated will. Her look was fulfillment. Her greeting meant homecoming. In silence, I stretched out my hands to her. She seized both of mine with her strong, warm ones. Now, we're going to come back to that later. There's a couple of things that I want to touch on, though, that happened in the video that very, very much stick out to me. The first one is, I had said from the beginning, because we saw on J-Hope's card that it was written Ava. So this one was a little bit more, I feel like this one was easier to get because we saw a direct connection already with Ava. And Ava, or Eve, depending on which version of the book that you have, mine, it says Mother Eve, is Damien's mother, which Sinclair has like been drawing this picture of his entire time. So it's funny because when we see that picture of the mother holding the child, Sinclair has these visions from early on. He has these dreams where he's dreaming of this person, but he can't quite remember her face, and it makes her kind of androgynistic, where it has like some male and female characters. And as he walks in, he realizes that this is Eve, and like immediately just kind of like falls for her all over again, but not necessarily again in a romantic way, but in like a longing for a mother type of way. And this is where kind of like the Carl Jung, the anima animus thing comes in, where this is like, she is like the epitome of both sides. A lot of these characters start displaying kind of like features of Abraxas, where it's like they're not necessarily right or wrong, good or evil, that there are some kind of middle ground. And she is kind of the epitome of that. While she has this fragile feminine side to her, she also shares some of these qualities from the other side. So it's something that like Sinclair is always looking to and like longing for him to be complete. And we're going to talk a lot more about that completion here in a little bit. I have a lot that I have marked down for this, but I think what I'm going to do is some of these, I think if what I'm feeling right now is correct in where we're going to go, I think some of these might be better quoted for the end when we summarize everything up. So we're going to be doing that. There's going to be a lot of reading towards the end because there's some very, very good passages in here that if you haven't actually read the book and you're only coming to the BU from a standpoint of like just getting anecdotes, there are some like very, very cool things that they've done here in terms of literal things. For instance, for one in here, I'm not going to necessarily read this passage, but Eve at one point in time gives Damien a piece of chocolate. And so the fact that like J-Hope takes a Snickers bar out of his pants and like has it and then has a smile on his face as he's looking at the photo is definitely kind of an ode there to her. But let's quick go through some of this. I hate how it skips to the next one. Let's go through some of this though, because there are some pieces here. Okay, so Munchausen syndrome, for those of you who don't know, is like when you make up like illnesses or diseases essentially for attention. And so we have, if this is true, if J-Hope actually has Munchausen, that his narcolepsy also may not be true. Like we think that it's like it's narcolepsy. Like I thought that he was like falling over and stuff, but maybe he's doing a lot of these things for attention because he didn't have a mother. He didn't have the motherly love, or he needs that anima to be able to complete him. And the more that I've watched this, the more that I think that each one of them doesn't necessarily display a specific character from Damien per se, but each one represents a different timeline for Sinclair. And again, I think that we're going to come back to that later when we talk about it, because I'm 90% certain of that. But if we look at that, then there is obviously a time where Sinclair loses what he feels like is his family and his identity and feels completely lost. So he doesn't really have that fatherly love. He literally figuratively kills off his father, and he also retracts himself completely from his mother. He feels so guilty because he ends up lying to his mother early on, and so he's like has the loss of this. So I feel like these are those very, very fragile moments in Sinclair's life, still early on, but after he committed his initial sins, which I think is V, where he is longing for this motherly figure. Now, obviously, we have a Jimin and J-Hope pair here. We know that. And I want to say that this looks like they're in the same hospital. They could even be looking like almost like when you have like the mirrored things where you can see through one side of the mirror, but not the other. The other side looks like a mirror, but the other side's glass. I feel like they're both at the same point in time. J-Hope and Jimin are both looking at that here. And I think that both of them are coming. The reason that they're probably a pair is because I think that both of them represent a very similar timeline in Sinclair. And that is that immediately after the Apple incident happens, the initial sin happens, which is Jimin. And immediately after that is when he starts lying to his mother. And so we see that Jimin has basically been abandoned by his family, it seems like he's been put into this facility. We don't really see a lot of him outside of the facility, and most of his stuff, besides when they're like in their Neverland dream states, he seems to be mostly in a facility. And whether or not that's because he tried to commit suicide or for some other reason, I think that there's an abandonment thing going on with Jimin, because the order should go JK and then V. Jimin would come directly after that, where he starts lying to his family, and so he then is ostracized from them. And then J-Hope comes right after that, where because he's ostracized from them, he feels this longingness and need for this maternal figure in his life, or paternal figure, but just that part of him that's missing. So I think that we see that there. Obviously, the pills were the same ones that we saw from Jimin's, but the interesting thing is we saw the flash here with V. Now, I haven't really we know by process of elimination and what we saw at the end that the pieces line up there, and that those pieces don't necessarily match up with what we think that the pairs are. And I haven't really figured out the correlation of that, but we did see a flash here where that happened. The colors are more from what we saw in Jungkook's painting. We have the feathers here, which is a tie back into Jimin and some of the innocence and things like that. And then we have him laying on the floor. Now, this portion looks kind of similar to like when Jin is looking out the window. Jin wakes up from his bed and kind of looks out the window, and we have kind of that light and serenity. And I think this is kind of seems like an acceptance moment of like, this is where the tranquility happens. This is where the completion happens. And we have this lightness here. And this makes sense because in the chapters with Eva, there is a portion here where while these characters were all real characters at some point in time, that they themselves actually now represent a part of Sinclair, okay? And so the line between real and imaginary is a very, very fine line. And specifically, Sinclair ends up painting this picture of her, and it kind of comes to realization. And so I think that the painting here kind of represents it, and it turns into her, and that's what makes him feel happy. And we see that here in this passage. How glad I am, I said to her and kissed her hands. I believe I have been on my way all my life long, but now I have come home. She smiled in a motherly way. One never comes home, she said gently, but where friendly roads converge, the whole world's look for an hour like home. So essentially what they're saying there is like, there are these moments of self-realization when they're talking about coming home. And this is like part of the story where I truly believe that the vast majority of what is happening at this point in time is actually in Sinclair's head and is not real. Where for these fleeting moments of self-realization that we are complete, that our soul is complete, that we have our daemon, that we have our anima, that all of the pieces that we feel like are missing are there. And then for those short periods of time, it feels like home. And I think that's what's happening when he's staring at this here. It's reminding J-Hope of maybe reminding him of Jimin or maybe reminding him of the whole in general, but he's finally getting that peace, that motherly love that he's missing. And so therefore he feels complete in this moment. And we're going to come back. There's so much more of that passage that we're going to read here later. We have the chocolate bar that I talked about that she hands him. We see this at the end, which again, this was also part of V's, which makes sense because that's the start of the journey. And the only thing I can think of at this point in time with the pairs is that maybe that the initial pair is, for the younger person, like for V, that the initial pair is what started the event and the ending pair is what could solve the event. For V lost, clearly didn't have his mother there. Only his father was there and it was abusing him and his sister, so he didn't have the motherly love. And then J-Hope, and J-Hope's he's finding acceptance and finding the mother again. And so therefore the two of them together can be complete and whole, if that makes sense. The water and fire thing with Jimin and Suga, where again, early on, Jimin is part of Sinclair's earlier starting to sin and the loss of family and loss of everything like that, where Suga is much later in Sinclair's guide form, which would kind of display Pistorius as the fire burner of like kind of, because he's kind of like a pyro, but he thinks that like everything needs to burn and turn to ash, kind of like a phoenix, in order to be reborn, so that the water and fire, the two of them together, make a completion. And then with Jungkook and RM, Jungkook is actually his youngest side, where it's basically before Sinclair sins, and it's his complete adolescence. And then RM is actually the oldest part of Sinclair, which would theoretically be Damien, and I'm going to come back to that later. And so that the two of them make a completion within themselves because it's the oldest and the youngest. I think that there is a age representation going on here in terms of internally in Sinclair of which set they are, of that's why that they're paired, because it equals completion by pairing them up, if that makes sense. And then at the end here, we see the vergence of both of theirs to kind of resemble what the painting looks like, which is like the tranquility, right? And so that's what I think about the pairing that's happening in this particular way of why it's happening. I think that the pairing of the two, otherwise the relationship things, are for two very, very different things. And then the pairing here is for is the solution to the problem. Okay. That being said, I have so much more, but I'm holding it in. I'm going to wait because I think that it needs to be said all together at the end, and we're going to sum it all up. So let's go to the next one. Okay, this is it. Awake. Here we go. This one's also longer than the rest of them. Oh my God, guys. This is going to be a really long video.
Fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy
This is
the
the Abraxas quote.
The bird flies to God. That God's name is Abraxas.
Which we read in the previous episode. Huh. Oh my God. Oh, okay. I'm gonna watch the whole thing. Huh. Fire went out. Scratches on the door. V was scratching the side of the thing. He was scratching out Abraxas. Huh. I cried and laughed a lot, but they were all beautiful. It's cool that looks like water there.
믿는 게 아냐 버텨보는 거야 할 수 있는 게 다 이것뿐이라서 머물고 싶어 더 꿈꾸고 싶어 그래도 말야
What is that figure on the walls?
Yeah, it's my truth. It's my truth.
Is that Abraxas?
온통 상처투성이겠지. But it's my faith. It's my faith. 그래도 발버둥 치고 싶어. Maybe I can never fly. 저기 저 꽃잎들처럼 날개 단 것처럼은 안 돼. Maybe I can touch the sky. 그래도 손 뻗고 싶어 달려보고 싶어 조금 더.
Huh. Oh my god. Oh my god. Huh. Oh my god. Okay, I will be back. My mind is like right now. There's so much that happened here. So much. But I want to do a couple of things. What I want to do this time is we're going to go through the video one by one because there are pieces in the video that I think are super important. And then I have a bunch of passages from the final couple of chapters of Damien, which I think relate directly to what is going on here, that are super important. So it's going to be a little bit strap in. But I'm just going to start playing this through from where we start seeing this because there is a lot. So let's do this. Okay. We're going to come back to this, but I'm going to say something here that I actually was saying, I think, early on. And Damien will verify a lot of this. I believe that at this point in time, regardless of what type of events have transpired, that all of these things, if not most of the things that we are seeing, are memories inside Jin's head, and that each one is internalized inside of him. That a lot of these things, while the people are real, while some of the events may have happened at some point, that the vast majority of things that he's experiencing while he's in this bed are actually these dreams. And we're going to come back to that in Damien. And the reason is because each and every one of the things that we have seen throughout the films that other characters are doing are actually things that Jin himself is doing and objects around him. Let's just look at the table here itself as we come in on this. We have fire representing Suga. We have pills which are red, not the color of, they're not the color of Hobie's pills, which have been orange and white. But I think that the pills represent him, but this is kind of weird, and the only reason I remember this is we just watched these videos again not too long ago, and is it No, where they have the red pills, No or Norma Dream, I think it's No, where they have the red pills, and the red pills are basically supposed to make them forget what's happening. And I'm wondering here if that is what that representation is that he's trying to, the pills are like him trying to forget everything that's happened. We have the lilies here, and then we also have the apple, which was in Jin's mouth, or in Jimin's mouth, which will now shortly here be in Jin, and he raises it to his mouth almost the same time. And then we have the static feed coming through, almost like he's hearing something, but it's coming from within. It's just like static white noise, but it's almost like he's trying to connect with the outside world and can't. This is representative of RM from Reflection. So we have all these people here that have been represented. So he takes this out, and I think that this is his final, like, realizing that things aren't necessarily as they seem and aren't real. So he puts it to his mouth just like Jimin does here. Ugh. And then drops it because he's realizing it, and he can't go back to the garden anymore, which we've talked about the garden before with the apples. Okay, so two things happen here. One, he goes to take a picture because he's trying to capture these moments, just like he was back then. And I think that this is part of him trying to prove that things are real to himself, like when he took the photos early on with the Kodak, or when he was taking the camera photos and it was like something wasn't really right. He is in this in-between world where Jin is the culmination of all the souls at this point in time. And so I think to him, he's trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. And he goes to take the picture, and he can't take a picture of the candles because they then blow out. And then this is kind of interesting that the pills moved further away from him. I don't know if there's a significance to that, but also on the picture frame here, the words are gone or not as legible from the picture frame. So I think there's a couple things happening here about his detachment from reality, or maybe reattachment to reality, because this is all part of rebirth, is the realization portion. Oh my God, there's so much here. This is so cool. The piano clearly represents Suga's character. And then we have the darkness coming, because he's constantly waking up. I had no dream, which is a realization that he himself, like, this is actually happening within him. And now he goes back to the same place that he was before. This scene in particular is one that we're really, really going to get into from the book. It is amazing how well they captured it. So cool. We're going to get back into Blood, Sweat, and Tears as well. I want to go back here again. This is very, very reminiscent, kind of like the black pedestals with the white is very reminiscent of, if I remember correctly, what kind of it looks like in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So I'm kind of interested on that. And just the motif of the duality with Abraxas and stuff like that, the duality of woman and man, the anima and daemon thing, the inner self, all things that we're seeing here. Okay, V was trying to scratch things out before, so we have V, we have the broken frame, we now have him doing the same exact thing in almost the same exact way that Suga was, and then he blows it out like Jungkook does back earlier, because again, all of these things are actually happening inside of him. And then he's gonna burn these again in a different way. And I think that this is finally his realization. Oh, we also, oh my God, there's so much here. We have the piano. I hope that it shows a close-up on the piano. Again, I think it does here later. So this is him, like, I think coming to the realization that, again, he has to rise up. He has to kill everything off in order to rise back up. Oh, I missed that before. That was so quick. Okay. We have the chains that were on the phone booth. The chains here that are on the phone booth, and then we also have the picture here. So all these things that he's seeing in other people that other people are seeing are actually things that he's seeing himself. This is right down here. This is Suga's painting, the painting of Suga that Jungkook makes, meaning that he himself probably made the painting. The bird with the rebirth, symbolizing Jungkook, and the window opening, which we saw in, I believe, I Need You as well. And then the final, I think, realization is kind of like the Matrix thing of the reality of things and what is real and what isn't. And the trains, we hear the train sounds. We have the water element here again, which it looks like water on the floor. Oh my God. And I can't tell. So we walk through this hallway slowly. We don't need to watch all this. I think that this might be like, this seems very much like this could be a symbol for like a Abraxas, like the right and the wrong, the good and the evil. There's like the shield here. We have like kind of the sun there. I think that's where they're going with that one. Again, we have Jungkook's painting. Oh, it's so gorgeous. Which is again related to Damien. Ugh. And this is so amazing. So the words here are also very important. There's passages from Damien where they talk about essentially flying too close to the sun, and where that there are some people that are meant to fly and they can control it and they understand both sides, and then there's some people that let it get out of control and get away from them and they fly too close to the sun. We're gonna come back to that at a later time. But these pictures here that all end up brightening up are pieces of Jin. So this is RM, this is J-Hope, this is Jimin, this is Suga, this is Jungkook, and this is V. And because they're all pieces of him at this point in time, for him to feel complete and whole. And we get to see that here at the end because I don't know if you remember like back in science class, like in like biology or chemistry class, this almost looks like the inside of like what its cells look like. Kind of like the biological makeup of something, and then it splits off and it shows that basically all of these things came from one, which was Jin. Which is pretty freaking amazing. Now, I have multiple theories about why this is, but first we have so many passages to read, so get ready for it. I'm probably gonna read most of them just kind of through, and then we're gonna talk about each one of them a little bit, but then I'm gonna sum it all up at the end because there's a lot of passages here that I think are really, really important. So this takes place at the beginning of chapter 7 when he's about to see the mother, and where this is the last 2 chapters is where his self-realization starts happening in terms of Sinclair's self-realization. So he's gonna meet the mother for the first time, and it says, as she felt my interest, she took me into the house, searched through a leather album, and showed me a photograph of Damien's mother. I scarcely had any recollections of what she was like, but when I saw the little picture, my heart stood still. It was my dream picture. There it was, the tall, almost masculine woman's figure, resembling her son, with traits of motherliness, traits which denoted severity and deep passion, beautiful and alluring, beautiful and approachable and unapproachable, demon and mother, destiny and mistress. That was she. So this is important, and this is before he meets her. Sinclair ends up going to the house where he believes that Damien and his mother live. There is an old woman there that brings out this picture because he's trying to find out, and he sees this. Now, Sinclair has been painting this woman the entire time, basically from his dreams, which is very, very similar to what we see with Jin, because every single time that Jin wakes up, we're seeing these dreams happen where I believe that the vast majority of these were real people and real memories and ways for him to feel complete. This was something that was part of his childhood. But he has since, because he feels incomplete, because he's having a hard time letting go of his innocence, he's on this journey. These are acting kind of as a guide for him, just as they did as a guide for Sinclair. Because how else would Sinclair have known this face if he hadn't already had seen it and known it, which he does. He meets her very, very early on, and then he doesn't realize it. And so he's been painting this the other time. But the most important thing here is when we talk about demon and mother, destiny and mistress, because this is really where the Carl Jung stuff comes in with the anima and the daemon, the inner self and the maternal figure of the loving aspect of it. This is where all of this plays in, and we have to have these things in order to be full, which is kind of like our last circle here is complete. Like the circle's full. It's just completely filled in and dark. So this is where we start the self-realization. We continue to go forward. I felt that my destiny was leading me on. I felt that fulfillment was nigh. I was mad with impatience to think that I could do nothing to help myself. Once at a station, I think it was in Innsbruck, I saw at the window of a train, which was just moving out, a form which reminded me of her. And I was miserable for days. And suddenly, the form appeared again to me at night, in a dream. I woke up with a feeling as of shame, realizing the fruitlessness and senselessness of my chase, and I went home by the most direct route. So this is important for a couple of reasons, because this kind of gives us a reason why we see the trains often in the BU so far. We talk about the routes, and I talked about this, that like obviously trains are on a direct path. They can only go one way or another. But there is this inclusion of reality versus unreality, the dream world versus not the dream world, and then when the reality happens of taking that train home. So, and then the train is, of course, tied to destiny because the beginning and the end facet of it. So we're starting to see pieces of the story start to come together here of why that they use this particular story. Okay, so this next part is really the awakening part, and this is where we start really connecting the pieces of Sinclair, understanding what's really happening with him, and also the Jin is really happening. So there's a reason this is called Awake, and the awakening part is Sinclair finally realizing that while all of these people were parts, that they are now only in him internally. That they have, it's he himself going through his own hard journey that has actually been guiding him. And we get an actual taste of it here because him and Damien finally meet up, even though it's been a long time. And Damien says, "You recognize me at once?" "Of course. You're very much changed, to be sure, but you have the sign. We used to call the mark of Cain, if you recollect. It is our sign. You have always had it, and for that reason I became your friend. But now it is clear. I did not know, or rather I did. I once painted a picture of you, Damien, and was astonished that it was also like me. Was that the sign?" "That was it. It's fine that you are here now. My mother will be glad as well. I started. Your mother? Is she here? She doesn't know me a bit. Oh, she knows you. She will know without even my asking her who you are. You haven't let me hear from you for such a long time. So we literally have Sinclair finally coming to the realization, because he says, I painted you, but it looked like me. Because he realizes that it's his inner self, that these are all pieces of him now. And it's the same thing. We see the painting of Suga in Jin's room, but it also could definitely resemble Jin. It's because he's painting pieces of his inner self. These are pieces that were, again, real at one point in time, but now have become part of his very soul. There's so much more here. Next passage. Thus, as a little boy, I used to see the world on the morning of a great feast day, at Christmas or at Easter. I had not known what this world could still be so beautiful. I had been accustomed to living shut up in myself, and to content myself with the idea that my understanding for the outside world had been lost, that the loss of glistening colors was inevitable and connected with the loss of childish visions. So this, in Awake, we see the actual colors that are coming through, right? We see this in the painting. We see this with J-Hope. We see this with V, and we saw it here. We see these colors coming through, and the colors represent the childhood stuff, but the reason that they're like dripping down and they're like, it's the childhood trying to bleed out, but the childhood is gone at this point in time. We have the complete loss of innocence, but it's so cool when you just read that passage, how it literally, like, that's how it feels. Like the way that he describes the colors and the vanishing of the colors is exactly what it feels like Jin is going through. This one actually takes place right after the mama quote that we heard earlier, but there's a full passage here, which I think is really, really important to understand. There's so much. You are Sinclair. I knew you at once. I am very glad to see you. Her voice was deep and warm. I drank it in like sweet wine. And now I looked up in her tranquil face, into the black eyes of unfathomable death. I looked at her fresh, ripe mouth, queenly forehead, which bore the sign. How glad I am, I said to her and kissed her hands. I believe I have been on my way all my life long, but now I have come home. She smiled in a motherly way. One never comes home, she said gently, but where friendly roads converge, the whole world looks for an hour like home. So we read part of this earlier, and this is really important because we talk about where friendly roads converge, and this is where all of these things are pieces of Jin, and Jin only feels like he can be complete by having these probably these childhood memories, these childhood friends in his life. And part of him that's in his bed, I think, is going back and trying to change his events so he can hold on to that youth, so he can go and hold on to that spirit of what they had before that time. But every single time he tries to do that, he winds up back, because we see him multiple times back in a bed, back in a bed, back in a bed, because he keeps waking up. The darkness, he keeps waking up from the darkness. And he's trying to go back to this place, but he can't necessarily be there. But again, it's the same thing where she recognizes him without him ever having seen her, because, again, she is part of him. And this is all part of the destiny. This is all part of we can only feel at home once we're complete with everybody else. You have never given Max, Damien, more pleasure than by sending this bird, she said musingly. And I was pleased as well. We expected you, and when the picture arrived, we knew that you were on the way to us. When you were a little boy, Sinclair, my son came one day from school and said, "There's a boy who has the sign on his forehead. He must be my friend." That was you. You have not had an easy time of it, but we had confidence in you. Once, in the holidays, when you were at home, Max met you again. You were at that time about 16 years old. Max told me. Now, before I continue here, this is very, very important. And again, the reason why I said before, Jungkook is Sinclair at his earliest, is at his youth. RM represents Damien. And Sinclair at one point in time, if you watch the last episode that we did, paints the picture, but RM winds up with the bird picture that Jungkook has early on. Now, Jungkook doesn't know how this happened because he really doesn't even know where to send it. He sends it and then winds up with a response from Damien, but he never puts a return address on it. He never puts who the picture is from. He doesn't even sign the painting. So the fact that Damien somehow knew, again, suggests that he never actually sent the painting, because we see RM burn it and eat it. He actually burns the painting, eats the ashes from it, and internalizes it within himself, but then RM wakes up with it and then tattoos the bird to himself. And that's where the pair kind of comes in, is it's Damien is actually leading his youngest self, Sinclair at the time, to and through this journey. And once Damien, again, was real at one point in time, but later on Damien goes away, and then Sinclair internalizes Damien to make all these things come true, which is where we have on RM and Jungkook's character. We continue. I interrupted. Oh, that he should have told you that. It was a most miserable time I have had. Yes, Max said to me. Now Sinclair has the hardest time before him. He is making an attempt to escape to the community. He was even taken to drinking with the others, but he won't succeed in that. His sign has become dulled, but it shines secretly. Was not that the case? Oh yes, it was exactly. Then I found Beatrice, and finally a guide came to me. His name was Pistorius. For the first time, it was clear to me why my boyhood was so bound up with Max's, why I could not break away from him. Dear lady, dear mother, at that time, I often thought I should have to take my life. Is that way so hard for everyone? She let her fingers stray through my hair as gently as if a light breeze were blowing. It is always hard to be born. You know, it is not without effort that the bird comes out of the egg. Look back and ask yourself, was the way then so hard? Only hard? Was it not beautiful as well? Could you have had one more beautiful, more easy? I shook my head. It was hard, I said, as if in sleep. It was hard until the dream came. She nodded and looked at me penetratingly. Yes. One must find one's dream. Then the way is easy. But there is no dream which endures for always. Each sets a new one free. To none should one wish to cleave. I started. Was that already a warning? Was that already a warding off? But no matter. I was ready to let myself be led by her and not inquire after the end. I do not know, I said, how long my dream is to last. I wish it would be forever. My fate received me under the picture of the bird, like a mother, and like a mistress. To it I belong, and to no one else. As long as the dream is your fate, so long must you remain true to it, she said, in earnest confirmation of my remark. I was very sad, and I'd wish ardently to die in the hour of enchantment. I felt the tears for what an interminably long time had I not wept, rise irresistibly and overmaster me. I turned violently away from her. I stepped to the window and looked out, my eyes blinded with tears, away over the flower pots. There's a lot that happens here. And we start with he's acknowledging that he found a guide. He acknowledged that Damien was part of his destiny, because each one of these were such a big part of Jin. And that it was his destiny. And by following that and accepting that and not trying to shy away from it, which he does early on, and we do see that in some of these characters as they go through it. V tries to escape with vandalism. We see the pills. We see all kinds of things here that represent the normal escape outlets from us accepting our destiny and our fate. But instead, when he chooses to embrace it, he finds guides that are able to lead him. And each one of these, again, acts as a part of him and also as a guide. But then we talk about the rebirth portion. And whether or not they all literally died or figuratively died, Jin must kill off each and every one of these old portions of Sinclair in order to be reborn. It's why he burns all 5 or all 6 petals, because if he can't kill off all of these things that he's holding on to, these old memories, these old things that still attach him to his previous life, he cannot be reborn again as the hawk or as the phoenix. And so all of these things are guides to lead him there, which is just incredible. And then he acknowledges that it's fate that is leading him. And then we start seeing more about the dream world, his acknowledgement that these dreams are what led him there. And so we see a lot of that in Jin, where these dreams are coming to him, and we don't necessarily know if these are memories or if these are new dreams, if these are things that he's trying to escape. But what we know for certain is that he keeps waking up in the same moments over and over again. He keeps waking up in a similar bed, in a similar situation, even though he goes back and he's trying to do things or he's trying to be part of this. And these are all things that he has to kill off in order to move through into the future. The next passage. Yes, Damien, what a marvelous mother you have. Mother Eve. The name suits her perfectly. She is like the mother of all beings. He gazed for an instant musingly in my face. You know her name already? You ought to be proud, young friend. You are the only one to whom she has said it in the first hour's acquaintance. Now, Sinclair refers earlier that, like, if he could die in this 1 hour of enchantment, that would be great. So we see this whole thing of the first hour, and this is the starting moment of clarity. This is the J-Hope moment, especially where he finds what is missing from him in the motherly figure. And it's not necessarily a physical mother, but a mother of all, and the mother and maternal part of our souls that is missing, the self-love, the fragile part that we need to accept within ourselves in order to become whole. We need to stop running away from it. We have to stop making up all of these excuses, Munchausen syndrome with diseases, and we have to let go and accept what our fate is. And that's why he ends up smiling when he sees the picture of the mother, which is Eva in this case. We who bore the sign were probably justly considered by the world as peculiar, yes, mad even, and dangerous, for we were awake, or were waking, and our endeavor was to be more and more completely awake, whereas the others strove to be happy, attaching themselves to the herd, the opinions and ideals of which they made their own, taking up the same duties, making their life and happiness depend on common interests. So this is interesting in 2 ways, and we talk about the awakening here. We talk about the acceptance of inner self, and that each one of them is attempting to escape, but then has to own up to their own actions and accept what is happening. And while each of them feels incomplete, we again, with the whole Carl Jung thing and early on, it's not that we should be looking for our completeness. We shouldn't be looking for the thing that completes us. We should start looking for a way to accept that we are already complete, and therefore, by doing so, can accept true happiness. And what they're talking about here is the difference between the people who are constantly looking for happiness, they're looking to be completed, versus people who are looking for ways to awaken themselves and accept that they are already complete individuals. And this is where Awake really, really leads off, because this is what Jin is going through right now. This whole timeline has probably been happening right here during Awake. Everything that has been going on is happening all during this portion, these dreams, everything. Again, some of the memories might be from earlier on or in the future, because we don't know how much he's tied to these fates, if they're all his fate, if he's altering their fates. But what we do know is that they are pieces of Jin, at least in my opinion, that they are pieces of Jin, and that because of the timelines, because of the way that they're overlapping, that he has the ability to then look at that completeness in himself, that he's finally awakening with the blurred vision and seeing all this and saying, I'm already complete. This is all part of me, and I have to start accepting this in order for me to fulfill what my fate is and what my destiny is. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. We have more, though. We have more. Don't worry. I know. You're like, how is there more? She felt immediately when a change was taking place in me, when my soul was troubled, or when a renewal was in progress. It seemed to me as if the dreams I had in my sleep were inspired by her. I often related them to her. She found them quite comprehensible, and natural. There were no peculiarities which she could not follow clearly. For a time, I had dreams which were like reproductions of the day's conversation. I dreamed that the whole world was in revolt, and that I, alone, or with Damien, tensely waited for the signal of fate. Fate remained half concealed, but bore somehow, or other the traits of Mother Eve, to be chosen or rejected by her. That was fate. Sometimes, she said with a smile, your dream is not complete, Sinclair. You have forgotten the best part. And it sometimes happens that I recalled it then, and I could not understand how I had come to forget any of it. So again, we come to the realization of the self-realization, that the mother, that the accepting of the anima is then part of what we have to do. The daemon is the self, and that we also have to accept this other side of us in order for completion to happen. But because of this dream state, because of the way that we think about it, because we're constantly searching, we're missing out sometimes the best parts of it, and we're not accepting of those things because we're trying to run away from them. We also have the portion here about the reoccurring conversations. And so if Jin is consistently waking up over and over again, essentially in a similar timeline, and maybe trying to change events, or maybe trying to cope with his internal mechanisms, and he's fighting it himself, that a lot of these conversations have probably happened within him over and over again in different ways. And then I need you and then run. It does seem like that happens. Like there's different events that happen, but they only change slightly. Obviously, some of them are things that we're looking at from the past, but some of them, when they're all together, just look like different iterations of what are things that are happening here. And because Jin is the driving force behind this, we can then possibly accept that these reoccurring conversations are actually happening in him. And when we see the photos at the end, and we see the photos earlier where there's people or pieces missing, that then makes sense because they're actually, in fact, pieces of him. I know this is a lot, and if you've already tuned out, I understand, but at the same point in time, I literally reread this entire book again while we've been going through this just to be able to do this, but there's so many important things, and if you've really never gone through it in this much depth, I hope that you're enjoying it. Okay. I also had dreams in which my union with her was accomplished by way of allegory. She was a sea into which I, a river, flowed. She was a star, and I myself was a star on my way to her. We felt drawn to one another. We met and remained together always, turning blissfully around one another in close-lying orbits to the music of the spheres. So this is directly related, I believe, to Jin's psyche. And this also goes into telling her this, at this point in time, he's no longer near Damien's mother. He's been detached from Eva, and yet in his dreams, he's seeing her. In his dreams, they are there, and so then in his dreams, they are complete. So much so, we hear the talk about water here, the sea, the river, and we see a lot of them, whether it's drowning. Water plays a major, major impact of this, and that's because these are also things going on. We also see that there's a lot of darkness and light that shines through the darkness, which can be, and talk about the stars and the music of the spheres. We literally have spheres here in the logos themselves, in the ink blots that we have. And so this is talking about that harmony, the acceptance, all of those spheres aligning, but those spheres are aligning specifically in Sinclair's dreams and not in reality. We continue. There came a day in early spring that I shall never forget. I entered the hall. A window stood open, and the heavy scents of hyacinths, wafted by a warm breath of air, permeated the room. As no one was to be seen, I went upstairs to Max Damien's study. I knocked softly on the door and entered without waiting for permission, and I was in the habit of doing with him. The room was dark. The curtains were all drawn. The door to the little room adjoining stood open, where Max had set up a chemical laboratory. From there came the bright white light of the spring sun, shining through rain clouds. I thought no one was there and pulled back one of the curtains. There I saw Max Damien, sitting on a stool by a curtained window. His attitude was cramped, and he was oddly changed. The thought flashed through me, You have seen him like this before. His arms were motionless at his side, his hands in his lap. His face inclined slightly forward with open eyes, was without sight, as if dead. In the eyes there glimmered dully a little reflex of light, as in a piece of glass. The pale face was self-absorbed and without any expression, save that of great rigidity. He looked at a very ancient mask of an animal at the door of a temple. He appeared not to be breathing. I'm going to take a break here. We're going to continue the passage. If this does not sound like when Jin continuously like is sitting on the bed and staring out directly at the camera straight, or when he has those moments of breaks where it's like he's just not like he's not there, he's not cognizant, the glossiness in his eyes. We see this in the end where we see in his eyes like the bird flutter, like a reflection in glass. This is where that self-reflection is happening. And this is really where Sinclair is looking at Max, because Max at this point in time, if he's real in the story at this point, which I don't believe he is, if he's real at this point in the story though, the Max that he once knew is long gone. That Max, that the glass is broken, the ceiling has been shattered, and it's just left with Sinclair, with Jin, looking in on this former husk or shell of himself, because he realizes that that is what he is leaving behind, that is then what has to go, that he's outgrown that innocence that he once had. We continue. The recollection came to me thus, exactly thus, had I once seen him many years ago, when I was still quite a boy. Thus had his eyes stared inwards. Thus his hands had been lying motionless, close to one another. A fly had been crawling over his face, and he had then, 6 years ago perhaps, looked just as old and as ageless. Not a wrinkle in his face had changed. I was frightened, and went softly out of the room and down the stairs. In the hall I met Mother Eve. She was pale and seemed tired. I had not seen her like that before. A shadow came through the window. The bright white sun had suddenly disappeared. I went into Max's room. I whispered hastily, "Had anything happened to him? He is asleep or absorbed. I don't know what. I once saw him like that before." "But you didn't wake him?" she asked quickly. "No, he did not hear me. I came out immediately. Mother Eve, tell me, what is the matter with him?" She passed her hand over her forehead. "Don't worry, Sinclair. Nothing has happened to him. He was retired into himself. It will not last long." Next part is most important. "Shall I go see how he is?" I asked in a whisper. She smiled weakly. "Don't be a child, Sinclair," she admonished loudly, as if to relieve her own feelings. "Go now and come back later. I cannot talk to you now." So in these points of realization, of self-realization, Sinclair, it's very, very rare that Eva and Max are ever in the same place as once. And as he leaves the room and realizes that Sinclair is in this dark place, we also see that the tone has changed, and he talks about the light disappearing, and he talks about the darkness coming through. And then when he goes and approaches her, he says that he's never really seen her like this before, and that's because it's him internally that's changing. And he even talks about in here that it doesn't look like Damien over the last 6 years has changed at all from what he remembers, and that's because it was 6 years ago as the last time that he has likely seen Damien and seen him like this, and that all of this has again been part of his mind, his own psyche. And she asked him, "Did you wake him then?" Well, he didn't wake him then, nor is he waking him now, because obviously he couldn't, because it was part of him. But it's so amazing how they tie all of these things together. And she even specifically says when he talks about waking him, like, "Don't be a child." And this is like, no, it's time to grow up. Like, this is it. You have to continue to move forward. It's beautiful. We also see a little bit more of the FINIX talk here, and that's what's coming up. I walked out of the house and out on the town towards the mountains. The thin rain was falling obliquely. The clouds were driving at a low altitude under the heavy pressure, as if in fear. Down below, there was hardly any breeze, but on the heights above the storm seemed to be raging. Several times the sun, pale and bright, broke for an instant through the steely gray of the clouds. There came a fleecy yellow cloud driving across the sky. It collided with a gray cloud wall, and in a few seconds the wind formed a picture of a yellow and blue, of a bird of giant size which tore itself free from the blue melee and, with wide fluttering wings, disappeared in the sky. Then the storm became audible, and rain mixed with hail rattled down. A short burst of thunder with an unnatural and terrific sound cracked over the whipped landscape. Immediately after the sun broke through, and on the mountains close at hand above brown woods glistened, pale and unreal, the fresh snow. When I returned after several hours, wet from the rain and wind, Damien himself opened the door for me. He took me up with him to his room. A gas flame burned in the laboratory. Paper lay about. He appeared to have been working. "Sit down," he invited. "You must be tired. It was a terrible storm. It's evident you were overtaken by it. Tea is coming at once." "Something is the matter today," I began hesitantly. "It can't only be that bit of a storm." He looked at me penetratingly. "Have you seen anything?" "Yes, I saw a picture clearly in the clouds for an instant." "What sort of picture?" "It was a bird." "The hawk? Was it that? The bird from your dreams?" "Yes, it was my hawk. It was yellow and of giant size. It flew up to the blue-black heaven." Damien took a deep breath. Someone knocked at the door. The aged servant brought in tea. "Take a cup, Sinclair. Do. I don't think it was by chance that you saw the bird." "Chance? Does one see such things by chance?" "Well, no. It means something." "Do you know what?" "No. I only feel it means a violent shock. The approach of fate. I think it will affect all of us." This is literally the ending where the fully acceptance of the awakening of the loss of innocence into the adulthood is happening. And he goes in and he realizes that something's not right with Damien because Damien isn't real. This is self-realization. Something isn't right with Eva. And he walks outside, and there in the clouds, he literally sees himself starting to begin his rebirth. The bird goes on into the heavens. And all of a sudden he goes back in, and Damien's normal again, which doesn't make any sense. And he's been working, which also doesn't make any sense, because Damien is, again, leading him on his final journey where the acceptance is happening. The admission of fate is finally happening, because it didn't happen by chance. And the fate was all going to affect all of them soon, which also talks about Jin and the fates of all of them. One last piece from this chapter. "Sinclair, we shall go through the experiences of which we have so often talked. The world is about to renew itself. It smacks of death. Nothing new comes without death. It is more terrible than I had thought." Frightened, I looked at him fixedly. "Can't you tell me the rest of your dream?" I begged timidly. "No," he shook his head. "No." The door opened and Mother Eve entered. "There you are, sitting together. Children, I hope you aren't sad." She looked fresh. Her fatigue had quite vanished. Damien smiled at her. "She came to us as a mother does come to frighten children. We aren't sad, Mother. We were simply trying to solve the riddle of these new signs. But that is of no importance. What it is to come will be here, and all of a sudden, and then we shall learn what we need to know." But I did not feel happy. When I said goodbye and went down alone through the hall, I felt that the hyacinths were faded and withered, reminding me of corpses. A shadow had fallen over us. In this final passage, before we see the true and final awakening, which is going to come next, Sinclair again comes to the realization that he is finally losing the childhood. It's his one last bit, his one last piece of childhood. She comes in and calls them children, which she doesn't do. She never does, and calls them both children. This is kind of where like J-Hope's character and V's characters would be. And then from that, as he's walking away, he starts really accepting what's going on and realizes that there's something wrong. He's admitting to the signs that he's seen, and then everything else is starting to fade away. That innocence is starting to fade as he's walking down the hallway. that those things are starting to go. And finally, we have the ending. We have only a couple portions here. Dear Sinclair, you called me today. You know why I did not come myself. But don't forget, you know the call now. And if ever you need somebody who bears the sign, call me again. This is super important. So at the end, when he's seeing them off, he sees Damien again. And in the final chapter, Damien supposedly is enlisting into the war as a lieutenant. And he sees Damien one final time, but he's been calling out to the mother in his mind. Literally, he talks about that he's trying to like send her like a psychic message. He's calling out to the mother. The mother doesn't show up, but sends a message through Damien. It's because, again, they're all the same person, and there's a psychic link that's happening because they're all the same. And that, but what she's saying is that, hey, if you ever need me, I'll be here. Now, this also comes back to the past where I think some of the characters feel that they have not had that. When we see this, if Damien is RM and we see that RM is like supposed to be leading some of them, the one we see V, so if V called out to RM and RM didn't show up, then that makes RM a liar. In the same case here, she doesn't show up, she sends Damien instead, and then there's a lying feeling that's going on. But it also talks about that obviously these things can't go on forever. We can't keep on with these emotions of innocence where we think that everything is just going to be fine just because we want it to be fine. But we see that there's a convergence, and again, they're never in the same room really with one another. And then, and finally, in the clouds, a large city could be seen, out of which millions of men were streaming, spreading in swarms over the broad countryside. In their very midst appeared a mighty figure of God, as big as a mountain, with glittering stars in its hair, and with the features of Mother Eve. Into it disappeared the processions of men, as into a gigantic cave, and were lost to view. The goddess shrank down on the ground, the sign of her forehead glittering brightly. She seemed to be under the influence of a dream. She closed her eyes, and her large features were twisted in pain. Suddenly she cried out, and out of her forehead sprang stars, which hurried in lovely arcs and half circles over the black sky. One of the stars rushed noisily through the air to meet me, as if seeking me out. With a crash, it burst into 1,000 sparks, lifting me off my feet and hurling me onto the ground. The world broke up in thunderous about me. So here we see Sinclair is actually on the battlefield at this point in time. And what he thinks is this vision of Eva, in the sky is actually a bomb. He's now serving in the war. And it's also ironic that both Damien is in the war and he's in the war because, again, they're the same person. And he's seeing these visions and thinking it's her, but it's actually shrapnel. So he gets hit with shrapnel, and that's what sends him back. And then after he gets hit with shrapnel, we have probably the most interesting part of the book. At last I was there. It was night. I was fully conscious, and I felt strongly the secret attraction and power which had brought me to this place. Now I was lying in a room on a bed made up on the floor. I felt I had arrived at the place to which I had been called. I glanced around. Close to my mattress was another, on which someone was lying. Someone who bent over and looked at me. It was Max Damien. I could not speak, and he neither. Could not, nor would not. He only looked at me. A lamp which hung over him on the wall cast a light on his face. He smiled at me. For what seemed an immeasurably long time, he gazed unwaveringly into my eyes. Slowly, he inclined his face towards me until we almost touched. Sinclair, he said in a whisper. I signaled to him with my eyes that I understood him. He smiled again, almost as if in compassion. Little one, he said, smiling, his mouth now quite close to mine. Softly he continued to speak. Can you remember Frank Cromer? He asked. I winked at him and could even manage to smile. Sinclair, old man, listen. I shall have to go away, Perhaps you will need me once again, on account of chroma or something. When you call me, I shall not come riding on horse, or in a train. You must hearken the voice inside you. Then you will notice it is I, that I am in you. Do you understand? And one other thing. Mother Eve said if that you were ever ill, I was to give you a kiss from her, which she gave me. Close your eyes, Sinclair. I obediently closed my eyes. I felt a light kiss on my lips, on which there was a trace of blood, which never seemed to stop flowing, and then I fell asleep. In the morning I was awakened to have my wounds dressed. When, at last, I was properly awake, I turned quickly to the mattress by my side. A stranger lay upon it, a man on whom I had never before set eyes. The bandaging hurt me. All that has happened to me since hurt me. But my soul is like a mysterious locked house. And when I find the key to step right down into myself, to where the pictures painted by my destiny seem reflected on the dark mirror of my soul, then I need only stoop towards the black mirror and see my own picture, which now completely resembles him, my guide and friend. Him is capitalized here, by the way. So in this final portion, he looks over. This is Sinclair's final awakening. He is coming to terms. He thinks that he sees Damien there. Damien, of course, confirms it. First, he calls him Little One because it harkens back to the beginning of his journey where he thinks that he first met Damien, where he may have actually met Damien. And then he calls him Old Man because it is Sinclair's acceptance of himself that he's no longer a child. He is now a man, and he needs to come to accept that. And because he's accepted that he is a man, he is no longer a need for a guide. Damien, Eva, Pistorius, Beatrice, all of the guides along the way were no longer needed because once he actually accepts his fate, he is now complete and he doesn't need a guide any longer. And so the final kiss is him basically giving it from Eva to himself, is his final gift to himself, that it's okay to let go. And when he wakes up, he realizes that he was never there. And this is his realization. He literally says, I'm in you. And that, I think, is exactly what's happening with Jin here. And again, we summed it up. We talked about JK, V, Jin, J-Hope, or Jimin, J-Hope, Suga, and RM are all the timeline from Sinclair's earliest youth, or from the most innocent side of yourself, of your own soul, to the oldest part of your soul. And Jin is the one that is having to come to terms with all of that. Now, I have two things from this, though, because if we understand this, one of two things that have happened. In this sense, he has been essentially hit by shrapnel and blown up. And Sinclair is telling the story from his adulthood and reliving it back. Which, if Jin is also in the same place and telling the story as an adult and looking back, and he wakes up repeatedly, then it could be that Jin is either injured or already dead. And I don't know. And I had a feeling from the beginning that it may have been Jin that was actually dead. And if Jin is actually dead, then my guess is that all the other things that have maybe happened were probably a butterfly effect or a ripple effect from Jin being dead, because then possibly Jin then couldn't go on to act as a mentor to all of these other individuals. The other part is that these things are all happening individually inside Jin, and that he, again, had met all of these people, and these were once childhood friends, but again, either in his passing or in a coma or somewhere in purgatory, somewhere near death, that he is reliving these moments, trying to fight the fact that he needs to move on, that he needs to die and be reborn into his adulthood, and then he's having a really, really hard time letting go of that, which is why he goes back to these memories of his youth, and they all represent different sides of him, of people that really were there at one point in time. The final thing is if there is a timeline here, that it is possible that with either within himself or in reality that Jin may feel like he can somehow change these events. And that by pairing these people together, by getting RM with Jungkook or getting, V and J-Hope together, that maybe by doing some of those things, that somehow he can change it. But I really think that it doesn't necessarily have to do with changing their destinies as it comes to changing his destiny or all of their destinies as a whole, which I think resides in his soul. That is my guess as of this point. And as of this point, I know that I'm going to edit this, but this is going to be like an hour and a half plus video. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. I am like completely nerded out. This took me probably about a full day, if not more, because I went back and like read the chapters, but it took a full day to really come up with all of this. And I had big breaks in between recording periods. So it's been absolutely fascinating to be on this journey. I can't wait to see more. I can't wait to continue. I know there's a lot of people that are like, you need to watch this. You need to watch this. It becomes clear in this. Again, I'll get there eventually. The whole point is to come up with theories as I go. And I know that a lot of people have already answered those, but it also doesn't mean that there aren't other theories that could be out there. And so I'd like to take a stab at it for myself as I go along. And I'm sure that some things will change. But at bare minimum, we know that this is from Damien. We know that there is a lot here to be said about the loss of innocence. We know that there's a lot here to be said if we, of course, accept that all of these are from Damien, which the quotes are directly from Damien, so you can't ignore that. That Damien is all about self-acceptance and the acceptance of a whole, and also about, it's not necessarily about good versus evil, but we have to accept both sides. We have to accept the innocence and the adulthood in order to be full and whole with one another and ourselves. And so therefore, if we accept that as true, then I think that probably ignites something within Jin and speaks to us about what Jin here is going through, and that Jin is all of the characters and Sinclair in one, because all of the characters are technically Sinclair. And so Jin is technically Sinclair as telling the story. He is Sinclair, the narrator, telling the entire story of Damien, which is his actual story, which is Jin's story, and going back from the beginning. And he's talking about all these people as being guides in his life and different moments in his life when he needed a guide. And then therefore he is also then a guide to them, and they are a guide to him, because it's all part of one big world. That's what I have. I really hope that you guys enjoyed that. I know that was a lot, and I have been so excited. I can't believe how much content and how long I've spent on these very short 2-3 minute videos. But it has been an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you. And there are going to be some videos coming out tomorrow, but this is going to be my last and final video that I'm actually recording in my timeline, in my real-time timeline. This will be the last video that I will be recording for you all before our big announcement on Saturday and our big change and our big metamorphosis. So I'm so excited to be here on this journey with all of you. Army, you are absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for being patient with me and for giving me a shot, because I know that when I started on this journey that I also was not as accepting, and you guys met me with kindness as opposed to meeting me with the same ignorance that I had, and that has changed me forever. So thank you all. If nobody told you that they love you today, I love you. You are appreciated, always welcome here, and you are enough. And last but certainly not least, it was a great day to play. Thank you all. And I will see you next time. Bye.
And it's time to change for the light.